What do you think happens when we die, Keanu Reeves?
I know that the ones who love us will miss us.
For decades, Keanu Reeves has been admired not only for his performances, but for something far quieter: his respect for the past. Long before he became one of Hollywood's most recognizable faces, Reeves was simply a young man watching old films, studying the stars who once defined cinema. In those black-and-white frames and timeless performances, he found something that modern Hollywood often struggles to recreate. There were women, icons of a different era, who carried themselves with grace, strength, and emotional truth. They did not just act, they endured. And among them, one name stood out to him in a way that felt almost personal. But before we continue, let me ask you, why do you admire Keanu Reeves? Tell us in the comments below. The grace that changed everything. Audrey Hepburn. There is a certain kind of silence that follows an Audrey Hepburn performance, not the silence of emptiness, but the silence of reflection. For Keanu Reeves, that silence meant something. It meant that what he had just witnessed was not merely acting, it was presence. Audrey Hepburn did not demand attention in the way many stars of her time did. She did not rely on overwhelming glamour or dramatic intensity. Instead, she moved with a quiet grace that seemed almost effortless. And yet, that very restraint is what made her unforgettable. When Reeves first encountered her films, particularly Roman Holiday and Breakfast at Tiffany's, he noticed something different. Hepburn's characters felt real. They carried vulnerability without weakness, charm without arrogance. There was a softness in her performances that allowed audiences to connect, rather than simply observe. For an actor like Reeves, whose own career would later be defined by subtlety and emotional restraint, this approach likely left a lasting impression. Hepburn showed that strength does not always need to be loud. Sometimes it exists in the quietest gestures, a glance, a pause, a moment of honesty. But what truly elevated Audrey Hepburn beyond the screen was who she became later in life. She stepped away from the spotlight to dedicate herself to humanitarian work, using her voice for those who had none. That transition revealed a deeper truth about her character. Reeves has often been described as one of the most grounded figures in modern Hollywood. In many ways, that same grounded nature is what he admired in Hepburn. She never appeared consumed by fame. She seemed guided by something more meaningful. And perhaps that is why, even today, Audrey Hepburn's legacy feels untouched by time. Some performances entertain. Hers stay with you. The fire behind the beauty. Elizabeth Taylor. If Audrey Hepburn represented quiet grace, then Elizabeth Taylor represented something far more intense, something impossible to ignore. For Keanu Reeves, watching Taylor on screen was not just an experience, it was a confrontation with raw emotional power. Elizabeth Taylor did not simply play characters, she inhabited them. There was a depth in her performances that felt almost dangerous, as if she were willing to go further emotionally than most actors dared. Whether it was her commanding presence in Cleopatra or the unfiltered vulnerability she displayed in Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, Taylor brought a kind of honesty that refused to be softened for comfort. Reeves has always been drawn to authenticity in performance, and Taylor embodied that in a way that felt rare, even in her own time. She allowed audiences to see flaws, contradictions, and emotional conflict. She was not interested in perfection. She was interested in truth. That truth extended beyond the screen. Taylor's personal life was lived just as openly as her performances. Her relationships, her heartbreaks, her resilience, they were all visible to the world. Yet instead of retreating, she leaned into her experiences, allowing them to shape her voice. One of the most defining aspects of her legacy was her courage. At a time when many remained silent, Taylor used her influence to advocate for AIDS awareness, standing beside those society often ignored. It was a risk, both personally and professionally, but she never hesitated. For Reeves, that kind of fearlessness carries weight. It reflects a deeper understanding of what it means to be not just an actor, but a human being navigating the complexities of life under constant attention. Elizabeth Taylor was never meant to be simple. She was passionate, contradictory, strong, and vulnerable, all at once. And perhaps that is why her presence still feels so alive. Some stars shine. She burned. The woman who became a princess, Grace Kelly. There are few stories in Hollywood that feel as improbable as that of Grace Kelly. For Keanu Reeves, her life and career represent something that goes beyond cinema, something almost myth-like. She was not just a star, she became a symbol. On screen, Grace Kelly carried herself with a composure that felt effortless. In films like Rear Window and To Catch a Thief, she displayed a rare balance, elegance paired with quiet intelligence. She never needed to overact or demand attention. Instead, her presence alone shaped the scene. Reeves has often gravitated toward actors who understand the power of restraint. And Kelly mastered that language. A subtle glance, a measured pause. These were her tools. She trusted the audience to feel what was not being said. But what truly set Grace Kelly apart was not only how she performed, but the life she chose to live. At the height of her Hollywood success, she stepped away from it all. In 1956, she married Prince Rainier III and became Princess of Monaco, leaving behind a career many believed had only just begun. To the world, it felt like a fairy tale. But for actors like Reeves, it also represented something deeper. A willingness to choose a different path, even when fame offers everything. Grace Kelly did not chase longevity in Hollywood. She chose transformation. And in doing so, she preserved something rare. Her image was never diluted by time or overexposure. She remains frozen in memory as she once was, poised, radiant, untouchable. Reeves has always valued privacy, often stepping away from the spotlight when necessary. In that sense, there is a quiet parallel between him and Kelly. Both understood that identity is not defined solely by fame. Grace Kelly's legacy is not built on quantity, but on presence. Some stars evolve over time. She became timeless the moment she chose to disappear. The mystery that the world never fully understood. Marilyn Monroe. Some stars are admired, others are remembered, but Marilyn Monroe became something else entirely, a question the world never fully answered. For Keanu Reeves, her legacy is not just about fame or beauty, but about the quiet complexity hidden beneath it. On the surface, Monroe seemed to represent everything Hollywood wanted: glamour, charm, and a presence that could light up any screen. In films like Some Like It Hot and The 7-Year Itch, she delivered performances that felt effortless, almost playful. Audiences laughed, admired, and watched her closely. But Reeves, like many actors who look deeper into the craft, saw something else. He saw the effort behind the image. Marilyn Monroe worked harder than most people realized. She studied acting seriously, challenged directors, and pushed herself to be taken seriously in an industry that often reduced her to a single idea. That struggle, to be seen not just as a symbol, but as a person, defined much of her life. Reeves has always respected artists who carry quiet battles within them, and Monroe carried many. Behind the cameras, she faced loneliness, pressure, and the constant weight of expectation. The world wanted her to remain perfect, but perfection leaves little room for truth. What makes Monroe's story so powerful is not just how she lived, but how she endured. She continued to show up, to perform, to give something of herself, even when it cost her. For Reeves, that kind of vulnerability is not weakness, it is courage. Because to stand in front of millions while feeling unseen requires a strength that few truly understand. Marilyn Monroe was never just an image. She was a human story, layered and unfinished. And perhaps that is why, even now, the world still searches for who she really was. The strength forged in hardship, Sophia Loren. Not all legends are shaped by fame alone. Some are forged in hardship, in moments long before the cameras ever arrive. For Keanu Reeves, Sophia Loren represents that kind of strength, the kind that does not fade with time because it was built long before success. Loren's early life was far from the glamour she would later embody. Growing up in war-torn Italy, she experienced poverty, uncertainty, and the harsh realities of survival. These were not distant memories. They were formative experiences that shaped who she became, both as a person and as an actress. When Reeves reflects on performers who bring authenticity to the screen, Loren stands apart. Her performances never felt artificial. In films like Two Women, she did not simply act out pain. She understood it. That understanding gave her work a depth that audiences could feel without explanation. There is a difference between portraying emotion and living it. Loren blurred that line in a way that made her unforgettable. Reeves has always been drawn to grounded individuals, people who carry their past with them without allowing it to define their limitations. Loren embodied that balance. She never distanced herself from where she came from. Instead, she carried it with pride, allowing it to inform her work and her presence. Even as she became an international star, there was something remarkably steady about her. She did not seem consumed by fame or altered by it. Her identity remained intact, anchored in experience rather than image. For Reeves, that kind of stability is rare. It reflects a deeper understanding of life, one that values resilience over recognition. Sophia Loren did not need to prove her strength. You could feel it in every performance. And perhaps that is why her legacy still feels so real, even decades later. The legend who refused to conform, Katharine Hepburn. Some stars follow the system. Others redefine it. For Keanu Reeves, Katharine Hepburn belongs firmly in the second category, a woman who never asked Hollywood for permission to be herself. From the very beginning of her career, Hepburn stood apart. At a time when studios carefully controlled the image of their actresses, she resisted. She spoke directly, chose roles on her own terms, and refused to fit into the narrow expectations placed upon women in Hollywood. In films like The Philadelphia Story and Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, Hepburn brought a sharp intelligence and commanding presence that made her impossible to ignore. Her characters were not passive or ornamental. They were bold, articulate, and unapologetically independent. For Reeves, that kind of authenticity carries lasting value. Throughout his own career, he has avoided excessive self-promotion, choosing instead to let his work speak quietly for itself. In many ways, that same quiet defiance can be seen in Hepburn's legacy. She did not chase approval. She defined her own path. Hepburn's confidence extended beyond her performances. She rejected many of Hollywood's conventions, including strict dress codes and carefully scripted public personas. She wore what she wanted, said what she believed, and trusted that her talent would carry her forward. And it did. With 4 Academy Awards for Best Actress, her record still stands. A testament not just to her skill, but to her consistency and courage. For Reeves, Katharine Hepburn represents something essential about true artistry: integrity, the ability to remain unchanged by the pressures around you. Some actors adapt to Hollywood. She reshaped it, and in doing so, she left behind a legacy that still challenges and inspires those who follow. For Keanu Reeves, these women were never just names from the past. They were reminders of what cinema once stood for: grace, courage, authenticity, and quiet strength. From Audrey Hepburn's gentleness to Katharine Hepburn's defiance, each of them carried something that time has not erased. Their stories are not simply about fame. They are about endurance, about leaving something meaningful behind. And perhaps that is why their presence still lingers, even now. If you felt something watching their journey, take a moment to subscribe. Because here, we don't just remember Hollywood, We remember what it meant.